Hello, everybody, and welcome into the first edition of the OKPreps Kickoff Show. I'm your host, Michael Knight. It is that time. It's week 0. I know that may be hard to believe for some, but the 2019 football season is upon us, and we're kicking things off on Thursday with several games. And then, of course, the majority of games will take place on Friday, and we even have some Saturday games. Those will be taking place out of state, but we'll get into that and many other topics here on the OKPreps Kickoff Show. Like I said, I am your host, Michael Knight, and every single Wednesday and Thursday, you'll be able to join us here on our Kickoff Show when we take a look at the top matchups across the state of Oklahoma. We'll take a look at some of the top storylines going into every week. We'll look at some players to watch, and of course, we're going to be making some picks as well in those top 10 games. If you haven't done so already, you can subscribe to the OKPreps YouTube channel. Just search OKPreps, hit subscribe, and you'll get not only all of our kickoff shows, but all of our great YouTube content throughout the 2019 season. You can also subscribe to our OKPreps podcast channel by searching on iTunes OKPreps, and you'll be able to get not only this show, but you'll get our OKPreps Roundup show, which releases every weekend, and that's podcast only, so you can only get it if you search OKPreps on iTunes, hit subscribe, and then you'll get every single edition of the OKPreps Roundup. Our first episode will drop this weekend once all the games have finished. As we will each and every single week, we're going to kick things off with the OKPreps Top 10 Games. Those are released every Monday. You can check out that article on OKPreps.com. Every single Monday, we release the top 10 matchups in the state of Oklahoma, and we start with our game of the week, the number 1 matchup of the week, and that features Class 4A's number 4 Broken Bow traveling to Tulsa to take on Class 2A's number 1 Metro Christian. Metro Christian 8-3 all-time against Broken Bow. They've met. This will be the 12th consecutive season that these two teams have met. They used to be district foes for a 4-year stretch earlier in this decade. Just a few years ago, they were in the same district in Class 4A, but with Metro Christian dropping down to Class 2A, they still meet in the non-district schedule. And here's an interesting tidbit about this matchup. They've met 11 consecutive years now, and they don't exchange film. So to think about that, for you coaches that might be out there, you know how important it is for the game plan. For you players that may be watching, you know how important that is in preparation for a game on a Thursday or a Friday night. These two teams don't exchange game film. I found that out earlier this week. Why don't they do it? I don't have an answer to that question, but nevertheless, something must be right between these two because they continue to play each other. Again, this is the 12th straight year that these two teams have played one another. Metro Christian won last year 28-22, improving their record against Broken Bow to 8-3 all time. And the reason that this game is our number 1 game of the week is because of the matchup itself. Metro Christian, the number 1 ranked team in Class 2A, our preseason pick to win the Class 2A state championship, going up against one of the best teams in Class 4A with one of the best defenses, not only in 4A, but in the state of Oklahoma. Broken Bow has the majority of their starters coming back on defense. They were stingy last year. They're going to be even stingier this year, and they're facing Metro Christian, one of the top offenses in the state of Oklahoma, led by their quarterback, OKPreps Player of the Year finalist from a year ago, Asher Link. So this is going to be a great matchup without a doubt. That is why it's our number 1 matchup in the OKPreps Top 10 Games. At number 2, you have 6A Division II's number 2 Booker T. Washington. They're going over to Bentonville, Arkansas on Saturday to take on North Little Rock, one of the top teams out of Arkansas. These two teams played last year. North Little Rock won 29-28. Turnovers hurt Booker T. Washington early on in the first half in that matchup. Last year, they were able to make a surge in the second half to make it close, but that first half hole was too much for the Hornets to overcome. They lose to North Little Rock 29-28. It should be noted that before that game starts, Midwest City is going over to Bentonville as well to take on Bentonville earlier in the day on Saturday, I should say. It's being labeled as the Rumble in the Ozarks, so I definitely encourage all you Oklahomans out there. If you're not going down to Texas, there are a few games in Texas. There are no Oklahoma colleges, as far as the Division I level, TU and OSU, they're playing Friday night. OU is playing Sunday night. So as far as Saturday goes, it's a wide open slate for you to go over to Arkansas in Bentonville to catch two great games. Midwest City taking on Bentonville, Booker T. Washington taking on North Little Rock. We also have some games going on down in Texas, and we'll get into that here in a little bit as we go down the way with the OKPreps top 10 games. Our number 3 game is 6A Division II's number 1 Bixby taking on Mansfield Timberview out of Texas. That game will be taking place on Friday night. Bixby and Timberview played last year with the Spartans winning it 36-33. Timberview outgained Bixby by over 150 yards of total offense. So what that tells you is Bixby was able to take advantage of some Timberview turnovers, some short field situations. They were also able to score on a variety of big plays that helped them get the win despite being outgained by Timberview by over 150 yards. And when it comes to the border war, which is what they call the 5 Tulsa Metro teams, Bixby, Union, Sand Springs, Jinx, and Broken Arrow going down to face the 5 Mansfield schools, Mansfield Timberview is the top-ranked team out of the 5 Mansfield schools. So that's going to be a great matchup as Bixby goes down there to take on Timberview in a rematch of last year's 36-33 victory. Our number 4 game is another 4A, 5A battle. It is 4A's number 5 Poto against number 7 out of 5A El Reno. Poto traveling to El Reno to face off in week 0. They beat El Reno 38-19 last year. But if you look closely at that matchup, it was a game that Poto was able to run away in the 4th quarter to really extend that lead and make it look like they really handled business throughout. But El Reno stayed within scoring distance for the majority of that game. We're really high on El Reno. I like the way they finished the season last year. They really pushed Carl Albert in the playoffs in the first round. They have their star quarterback Dorian Plumlee back. I really like El Reno this year in Class 5A. But then again, Poto, they're not going anywhere. They have a new head coach, sort of. Greg Werner regains control of the Poto football program, taking over for Forrest Mazie after he left for the McAllister job. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup between 2 top 10 teams in 4A and 5A. Our number 5 game is another Oklahoma-Arkansas battle as Owasso will travel to Bentonville to take on Bentonville West on Friday night. Owasso won an absolute shootout with the Wolverines 56-40. Bentonville West is coached by former McAllister head coach Brian Pratt. He brought Bentonville West over to the Tulsa area last year and really put a scare into Owasso in the season opener. Owasso was able to win it 56-40. They outscored Bentonville West 35-6 in the 4th quarter to run away with that. Quarterback Will Keeney had a huge night, and we'll see what happens as the Collinsville transfer Cole Duggar. He is now in charge of the Owasso offense at the quarterback position. Will he have another big night? That's a big test for him in his first start at Owasso. Obviously, he does have experience playing at Collinsville a year ago. They were a very good team, but they ran the ball a lot. More is going to be expected of Duggar in this Owasso offense. He certainly has the weapons around him to put up some big numbers. Our number 6 matchup is 6A Division I's number 3 Union. We go back to the border war as number 3 Union will travel down to Mansfield to take on Lake Ridge. Union beat Lake Ridge 36-30 in their matchup last year. They shut out Lake Ridge in the second half in that matchup. And this is a Lake Ridge team that has to replace a lot. So does Union as well. So it's going to be an interesting tell to where these two teams are going. Obviously, we care more about where Union ends up throughout the season, being an Oklahoma website and an Oklahoma team. We obviously want our Oklahoma teams to do well in the border war, but that's going to tell us a lot with how well this team is going to be, losing some serious weapons off of last year's team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They'll have a new quarterback lining up under center for them. They'll have a new running back in the backfield having to replace Darius Boone. So it's going to be interesting to see how that Union team fares in their first game down in the Lone Star State. Our number 7 game is 6A Division I's top-ranked team, the defending state champion Broken Arrow Tigers. They will take on Mansfield High. That game will take place on Saturday in Mansfield. Broken Arrow dominated this matchup last year. They won it 28-6, and really it was a shutout. I mean, had Broken Arrow not turned the ball over, Mansfield was able to take that turnover, get it inside the Broken Arrow 10-yard line, and they were able to punch it in. And when I say Broken Arrow dominated this matchup, they held Mansfield to just 50 yards of total offense. They dominated from start to finish, and that was an interesting matchup for Broken Arrow last year, considering the week before they had beaten Union, and they had beaten Union handily. They followed up that Mansfield win with a win on the road against Owasso. That was the start of what ended up being a perfect season for the Broken Arrow Tigers. How will they kick off the 2019 campaign? Well, they're doing it down in Texas. We'll have to wait and see, but I definitely think Broken Arrow has the firepower, maybe not to dominate the way they did in 2018, because that was special, holding a team to 50 yards. That's insane, but I think the Broken Arrow Tigers will definitely hold their own in this one. Our number 8 matchup, 6A Division I's number 4 Jinx travels down to Mansfield in our final Border War game, and they will take on Mansfield Legacy. This game will take place on Thursday. Jinx beat Legacy 35-14 in the matchup a year ago. This game was close as it was tied at 14 after the first quarter, but Legacy lost their star quarterback to a knee injury, and they were never really the same after that. Jinx was able to outscore them 21-0 over the course of the next 3 quarters to run away with the 35-14 victory. And these two teams going into 2019 are very mirror image like, as Jinx had to replace a lot off of last year's team. Legacy had to replace a lot off of last year's team as well. So they're both still very young. They're both very inexperienced. So you're not going to be able to take away a whole lot from Thursday's matchup as far as what these teams could end up being, because by the end of the season, both Jinx and Legacy are going to look completely different, I assure you of that. Our number 9 game, a little 8-man football, as we have a 1-versus-1. It's pretty early in the season for this, but we're fired up for it. A great 8-man matchup as Class C's number 1 Tipton, the defending champion in Class C, will travel to face on Class B's number 1 Shattuck. Both of these two teams, two of the best 8-man programs in the state of Oklahoma. Shattuck has dominated Class B for the better part of this decade. Tipton has done the same in Class C. Tipton was dominated by Shattuck in the opener last year as Shattuck won it 44-14. They jumped out on Tipton early 30-6. What happens in the rematch this year? One thing I can assure you is whatever happens, throw the scores out the window. Both of these teams, regardless of the outcome, are going to be very good in their respective classes. Our final game in the top 10 features a 6A Division I matchup. Both teams in 6A1 as number 10 Yukon travels to Edmond to take on Edmond North. And the reason I have that as our number 10 game is because I think the winner of this matchup, and we'll get into it a little bit later as far as teams on the rise going into week 0, I think the winner of this matchup could end up being a sneaky playoff team. I think that Yukon definitely has the talent to do it. And I think Edmond North, look, they've struggled a lot over the last couple of years, but I think they have the talent coming back. I love their quarterback, even though he might be a better baseball player than he is a football player, but nevertheless, I love what he brings to the quarterback position. I think Edmond North is going to be pretty good this year. They were shut out by Yukon last year, 28-0. I think that this game is a little bit closer. Yukon probably has the edge, but I think both of these teams are going to be much improved on what they were in 2018. The top storylines going into week 0, we first start with kind of what you've already heard about, the Oklahoma schools facing out-of-state competition. So how will our Oklahoma schools fare against the Texas schools, against the Arkansas schools? We mentioned the rumble in the Ozarks going on in Bentonville. Owasso traveling to face Bentonville West. You have Midwest City facing Bentonville. You have Booker T. Washington taking on North Little Rock. Down in Mansfield with the border war, we have Union facing Lake Ridge, Jinx facing Legacy, Broken Arrow facing Mansfield High. We also have Bixby in action against Timberview. Also Sand Springs taking on Mansfield Summit. How will the Oklahoma schools fare against the Mansfield schools? They went 4-1 in the border war last year. Let's look for a perfect 5-0 in the rematches this year. And it also should be noted down in one of the smaller classes in 3A, Plainview is also traveling down to the Dallas area. They'll be taking on Sanger Texas. And look, anytime you have a bordering state battle going on, whether it's Oklahoma and Arkansas, Oklahoma and Texas, you know where our heart is. You know what we'll be pulling for. We're pulling for those Oklahoma schools going on the road to take on some of these top teams in some of the neighboring states. Also, it should be noted that it is week 0. There are plenty of scrimmages going on across the state of Oklahoma as we lead up to week 1 of the 2019 season. So for a lot of schools around Oklahoma, this will be the final tune-up before the real thing kicks off a week from Thursday, a week from Friday, with week 1 right around the corner. For a lot of these schools, they are taking advantage of the week 0 rule. They got their 1 scrimmage in last week, and now it's game time. But for a lot of schools across Oklahoma, this is the final tune-up week before games start for real, starting in week 1. And then finally, the storyline that I'm going to be paying attention to is that 1 versus 1 matchup that we saw in 8-man football. If you're an 8-man football fan, this is going to be a must-watch, and the only reason we didn't have it higher up is because of some of the bigger school matchups. But 1 versus 1 in week 0, it doesn't get better than that. You have the defending state champion in Class B taking on the defending state champion in Class C. It's going to be a great matchup, a lot of points potentially for both sides with Shattuck and Tipton. Let's give you 5 players to watch. Some of these players and some of the matchups that we've already talked about, but let's start alphabetically, and we start with the quarterback of the Metro Christian Patriots. He is Asher Link. He was one of the finalists, like I mentioned, for the OKPreps Player of the Year award. He's taking on a Broken Bow defense that returns 8 starters from last year's team. This is a Broken Bow defense that shuts teams down. Whether it was last season or the season before, I believe they have a combined 8 shutouts in the last 2 years. So Asher Link definitely has his work cut out for him, but I do believe that Metro, especially on the offensive side of the ball, has the talent to really put up some points in a hurry. If he's able to have a good game against Broken Bow, that'll tell you what type of season Metro Christian is going to have, because he has the potential to really dice up Broken Bow defensively if he's able to do it on Friday night. This Metro Christian team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, is going to be scary. Another player to watch in one of the lower classes in Class 3A, Plainview, we mentioned them. Their wide receiver, Blake Now, the TCU commit, going down to Texas to take on Sanger. Plainview has championship expectations, and he's going to be a big part of what they do offensively. He's a game changer, man. If it doesn't take long to look at the tape and figure out why he's one of the top prospects in the state of Oklahoma. He's one of the top wide receivers, regardless of class, in Oklahoma. And I'll be interested to see what he does in the season opener for Plainview. We stay at that wide receiver position, and we go up to another Division I commit. It's Bixby wide receiver Brendan Presley. In their matchup against Mansfield Timberview, there's a guy on the other side of the matchup for Timberview who's committed to Colorado at the wide receiver position, and also the running back position, just an overall athlete. But that's exactly what Brendan Presley for Bixby is as well. Whether it's offense, defense, or special teams, this kid knows how to score in a variety of ways. I loved what Brendan Presley does on the football field since his sophomore year. I'm really looking forward to see what he does for his senior year, and it starts down in Texas. I think he might have a big game for the Bixby Spartans. In one of those top 10 matchups, you have El Reno quarterback Dorian Plumley, a junior at the quarterback position. I love what he brings to the field. He's a true dual threat at the quarterback position. He's not just going to stand in there and try to slice and dice you with his arm. He's going to move around. He's going to try to exploit the weaknesses in the Poto defense. He's put up big numbers. He put up big numbers last year. I think he could end up having a really big season for El Reno this year. So look for Dorian Plumley to have a big night in their season opener. And then finally, we go to another out-of-state matchup as Booker T. Washington will be taking on North Little Rock. Their sophomore quarterback, Gentry Williams. He already has a lot of publicity. If you've been paying attention in the offseason, he already has offers from several major college programs. One national media outlet has rated him as the number 7 overall prospect in the country, not just in Oklahoma, but in the country for the 2022 class. That's a lot of pressure on a young man who doesn't even have his driver's license yet, but he's a good, talented athlete. You just take a look at that speed that he has, and he's faster. As soon as he steps on the field, he's faster than just about every single player on that football field. What is he going to be able to do in the passing game? Obviously, he's been trying to improve on that, but the number one weapon, without a doubt, is that speed. He could end up having a big game over in Northwest Arkansas. Gentry Williams, your last player to watch here in the OKPreps Kickoff show. I mentioned earlier some of the teams on the rise as we look at week 0, some teams that are right now on the outside looking in the top 10 rankings, and we start in 6A Division I. I mentioned Edmond North. I think that they have the chance to be a sneaky playoff team if they, continue to grow on what they built in the offseason, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I think that offensively they could be a lot better than what they were last year. Edmond North, if they get a win over UConn in the season opener, they're definitely going to be on the rise and move into that number 10 spot in 6A1. Also, I look at the Altus Cash matchup down in Southern Oklahoma. That's 5A versus 4A. The winner of that matchup, they're definitely on the rise. Both of those teams just on the outside looking in on the top 10 rankings. I think the winner there definitely has some justification of why they should be a ranked team in their respective class. And then finally, a game on Thursday night. I like Cleveland, another 4A team. I think that this could be a big year for Cleveland. Their quarterback, Ben Ward, returning. I think it could be a big year for them. They take on Glenpool in the season opener on Thursday night. If they get the win, they might be knocking on the door of one of those top 10 spots in Class 4A. So those are 3 teams that, as of right now, are on the rise. Now, in this segment, what we're going to do is we're going to answer some of your questions. Every week, we'll be taking your questions not only on the OKPreps Kickoff show, but we'll also take them on the OKPreps Roundup every single weekend as well. You can tweet us your questions. You can send it to us on Facebook as well. Just add us at OKPreps TV on Twitter, and you can send us your question, and we'll answer it right here on the show. One of the questions we got from Facebook earlier today was, what do you think of Edison this year, the Edison Eagles out of Class 5A? What do I think of them? Well, if you saw our preseason rankings, I'm pretty high on the Edison Eagles. I have them ranked number 4 in our preseason rankings. I think that outside of Bishop Kelly, they're the top team on the east side of the state. I think that led by running back Savion Morrison, this is an Edison team that is certainly on the rise and warrants that top 5 ranking. Now, the only question is, what happens now? Because you have so much pressure, you have so much attention on a program that, let's face it, isn't necessarily used to all of this attention from the outside. What happens next? How do you respond to that? And by the way, this Edison team isn't just Savion. They have plenty of playmakers around him on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. I think it could be a very special year for the Edison Eagles. We had this question on Twitter. How tough is District 3 in Class A, and will it help or hurt come playoff time? Well, we saw it last year, right? We saw in Class A, District 3, Cashin, Crossings Christian, Menko all had really good years, but they didn't end up going as far as they would have liked. But then you also had Christian Heritage, who finished in the 4th spot out of that district. They had to scratch and claw to get into that 4th spot in District 3, and then they went on all the way to the state championship game. So honestly, I think that playing in this district will help whoever ends up competing for a state championship in Class A. I think for those other 3 teams that fell short, whatever it may be, injuries, or they were just kind of fatigued, just the matchups weren't right, whatever may have happened, I think that this year, whoever gets out of District 3, Cashin, obviously the heavy favorite to do that. You can't overlook Menko. Crossings is going to be good. And oh, by the way, you can't forget about what Christian Heritage just did a year ago, going from, basically being out of the playoffs to being the 4th team out of that district and going all the way to the state championship game. I think that battle week in and week out, it'll prepare these guys for what to expect come playoff time. All right, let's wrap things up and make some picks before we get out of here. We go back to the top 10 games. Let's throw that graphic back up on the screen for you to take a look at those matchups if you're just now checking us out. Metro Christian, that number one matchup, they host Broken Bow. I think that Metro wins. They're the number one team in Class 2A. I think that they beat Broken Bow handily in this matchup. That offense is going to look good. They have some new turf down there at Metro Christian. I think that that offense is going to look fast. It's going to look real good come Friday night against Broken Bow. Booker T. Washington, I like them over North Little Rock, and I like the Hornets big, actually. I think that the Hornets are going to be able to handle business against North Little Rock and make up for that close loss to them last year. Bixby, kind of the similar situation as Booker T. Washington. They got a close win against Timberview last year. I love what Bixby returns this year, which is basically everybody. I think the Spartans are primed for a big year, and it starts with a big win down in Texas. Our number 4 game, Poto against El Reno. This one, very close. I think it could go into either way, but if you're making me pick, I'm going with the Poto Pirates. I think that El Reno is going to have a really good year, but I think that this game might just be a little too early for them. I think that Poto ends up winning a very close one. Our number 5 game, we have Owasso going to Bentonville West. I think the Rams win handily. I don't think they'll need any fourth quarter heroics to do so. I think that they'll dominate this game from start to finish. Our number 6 game, Union taking on Lake Ridge. I like the Redskins winning a close one. Our number 7 game, Broken Arrow dominated Mansfield. I like the Tigers again. This year, I think Broken Arrow wins it big. And then you have our number 8 game, Jinx taking on Mansfield Legacy. Both of these teams very similar to one another. I think that Jinx wins a very close one, but honestly, it could end up going either way. Our number 9 game, you have the 1-versus-1 matchup for 8-man football supremacy. Class B's number 1 Shattuck taking on Class C's number 1 Tipton. I like Shattuck to win that game handily as well. And then finally, our number 10 game, UConn traveling to Edmond to take on Edmond North. I like UConn to win a close one. But as I mentioned, I'm high on Edmond North. I think that they could have a big year and be one of those sneaky teams that make it into the 4th spot to make it into the playoffs. So, I think UConn wins a close one, but it would not surprise me one bit if Edmond North pulled out a win in the season opener. Finally, before we get out of here, we want to promote some content. By the way, subscribe to the OKPreps YouTube channel. You'll get all of our YouTube content, all of our videos, all of our highlights, all of our interviews. All of that will be right there for you to check out, subscribe. Be sure to leave a comment as well. We'll also answer questions there every week as well. And also subscribe to the OKPreps podcast channel, OKPreps Podcast Network on iTunes. Just search OKPreps and you'll get all of our podcast content, which includes the OKPreps Roundup, our recap show every single weekend. And then starting next week, we'll have the OKPreps Scene Setters, the return of the Scene Setters. If you heard them last year, what we do is we take a look at some of the top matchups in Oklahoma. We do more of a breakdown of those matchups, and then you'll get to hear from both coaches in that matchup. So our top matchup this week was Metro Christian and Broken Bow. Just for example, the scene setter of that matchup, you would hear from both head coaches to get you ready for that game on Friday night. The scene setters will return to the OKPreps Podcast Network starting next week. Also, throughout the week, we'll also be releasing interviews from our 4th annual OKPreps Media Day, whether they were players, coaches. We had about 75 interviews total done here in our OKPreps studios. So we'll have all that content releasing. Again, more of a reason for you to subscribe to OKPreps on YouTube. Also, we're putting out our championship predictions, who we have winning the gold ball in each class. So be sure to check out okpreps.com for that. And then finally, over the weekend, be sure to check out who's going to move up and down in the top 10 rankings as we release our new top 10 in each class from 6A1 all the way down to Class C. And then also on Sunday, we will have our first Player of the Week candidates. It will be a poll. You'll be able to vote for the fans choice winner, and then we'll make our staff pick selection for this week, the Week 0 Player of the Week. We release that every single Sunday. So be sure to check out okpreps.com for that. And as always, be sure, if you haven't done so already, to follow us on Twitter at OKPrepsTV, and also like us on Facebook for more up-to-date, up-to-the-minute high school information, news, notes, stats, stories, all of that and more throughout the 2019 season. We thank you for tuning in to the first episode of the OKPreps Kickoff Show. I'm ready for it. I can't wait. I can't believe it's already here, but I can't wait for the 2019 season to kick off, and I can't wait to preview each and every single week with you right here on the OKPreps Kickoff Show. One final time, I'm your host, Michael Knight, and we thank you for tuning in on the OKPreps Network.